On this episode of A State of Control, we talk about the 2018 edition of the Harman Developers Conference that was recently held in Richardson, Texas. What were the main takeaways from it? What were the unique aspects of it? And why did people attend? All that and more on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A State of Control.
A State of Control, episode 49, Harman Developers Conference 2018.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Harman International.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. This episode is more of one of our annual coverages where we talk more about the events in the industry in the calendar year rather than some of our evergreen topics. So if you have listened to past episodes, the last one being episode 38, we covered the 2017 version of the Harman Developers Conference. This year, we're going to talk about the 2018 version of the Harman Developers Conference. And with me to do so are three of the attendees, or actually one of them is our host and the other two are attendees. And I'll start with our host. His name is Chris Backus from Harman. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate you asking me to join you, and I'm excited for the conversation.
Excellent. And next is sort of a regular on our show. His name is Dave Hatz from AVI Systems. He's a Harman certified programmer and was in attendance with us at the event. Welcome, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And last but not least is Jared Spencer. He's from Damiano Global, and he is the first time on this show, but he's been following us, and glad for him to join us today. Welcome, Jared.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, we've covered this event in past years. I think this is the third time we've gone and bring back some of the information from the event. And each year this event changes. It started off being a little bit smaller, more focused on product, more focused on specific nuts and bolts training, more focused on passing along information to the VIP programming companies, which are those programming companies affiliated with, at the time, AMX, now Harman, or Harman, a division of Samsung. And we and now it's evolved to be a lot more than that. So, Chris, I'm going to start off with you. What is to give us a little bit of the evolution of this event, and also talk about what went into the thought process of the content for this particular year?
Sure. So this is the sixth iteration of this event, and it started, like you said, as a way of getting people in the independent programmer community together so we could really talk about some of the higher level concepts and just kind of a program meetup every year. But then over time, we grew that to start including within the last 2 years, folks that hold the highest AMX certification, which is an AMX Solutions Master. Those individuals have achieved all 5 certifications that AMX offers. And so really, as we look in the room as a collective of attendees, you have folks that are really doing this service full-time, day in, day out, as either independent service providers or within their own respective organizations. They've achieved a level of seniority within the industry and expertise within that programming language. So that's a little bit about the attendees and how long we've been doing it. But as far as what happens at that event, we really see it as a great opportunity to introduce new concepts, new product, new training. It's a way for us to especially with this audience of really experienced folks, potentially even try out new concepts and that we might want to present to other students around the globe. But we introduced them first here at the developer conference as a way of dry running it with people that really should know what's going on, and if they have any issues and struggles, we get to see kind of where those gaps are, and then modify it before we roll it out to other folks. But generally the week is split into two parts, and we take the beginning of the week, the first 3 days, to generally do some form of training activity that's really aimed at that. And then the last part of the week, as Thursday and Friday, are more roundtable discussions where we bring in different panelists from all parts of the organization to include tech support or engineering. At times you have application developers, so the guys and girls that are writing the tools that we work in every day. You had a chance to really sit face to face with them and ask those questions that have kind of either plagued you throughout the year, or you had come up that really they're the only people that can answer.
So Dave, you spent a week there, and obviously that's a good amount of time, both for you personally and for your company. Tell me the thought process that goes into what you look for in an event like this, and what you expect to get out of it.
Well, I mean, I think you hit a really important point there, is that, attending a conference like this is a big investment of time for, for myself, for my company, for Jared, for any of the attendees. And so first and foremost, I look at what can I get out of it, personally, as well as what can I get out that I bring back to my team, to those I work with, and to my clients. So in the case of, of this year's conference, I looked at the agenda, and a number of the topics that we talked about, and I know we're going to dive into some of these here in a little bit, but a number of the topics, we're starting to look at new technology trends or new areas of technology that we might not, as integrators or as programmers, have thought of trying to integrate our AMX Harman control system with these other products. And so it both intrigued me, but also is an area that I've, in the back of my mind, have been thinking for a long time that, hey, this is an area that we're going to need to start to get smarter about. Well, here, the Harman Developer Conference was an excellent opportunity to do so. One of the days was spent talking about Dante. It was going through the Dante certification. And yes, we can get that other places. We can do it online. We can go to other venues to have that training. But having it wrapped up as part of the curriculum here, while we're already traveling to Dallas to be a part of this, was valuable, because it's one of those things that is on the hit list of, I want to get to this. And so bringing it into the week was a great way to both bring that in, but also to bring it in with the focus on the Harman products and the way it fits in with Harman, because that's what the week is about strengthening our experience and our knowledge with the Harman portfolio of products. And so, as I look at it, that's all really valuable information that I can benefit for myself, and I can benefit by bringing back and sharing it with my team, in whether it's just the importance of going out and getting the Dante certification. Okay, I got a lot out of it here. It's now worthwhile. It's validated to send someone else. Whether it's talking about some of the next generation technologies and that, hey guys, this is important. Let me teach you what Harman taught me. Those are all really valuable pieces. And in the end, I think totally justify, the 5 days out of the office for myself anyways.
Jared, I'm going to jump over to you. So Dave talks a lot about bringing things back to his team. What are some of the things that you brought back to your team, and also a couple of the highlights that you took away from the event?
Well, one of the great things about especially the 3-day training classes, the first 3 days of the week like that, they do seem things that aren't directly related to even direct products, but they are all things that we face as programmers and even as lead techs on site and as the subject matter experts that we end up becoming on any project that we happen to be on. Things like the Dante certification, not only in explaining and leading from Dante into AES 67 and the SPSI tie-ins that we eventually got to in the other days. Following that, so you kind of had to have the Dante understanding before we could talk about the differences in the networking and the other things that those classes came up with. It does it gives us real training on our real world perspective, even when it's not related to things that are Harman. And I think that's a very valuable thing, especially for a manufacturer to try to provide like that, even though it may not be directly related to their products.
Well, so and you hit on a great thing there, that you know, the one piece I always take away from an event like this is the fact that it's the group. You know, that you and I wouldn't necessarily interact on a day-to-day basis, but all of us being in that room together, learning together, it also really elevates the level of learning and really becomes a really valuable piece, you know, that I talk to a lot of people about.
It's one of my favorite things about the Developers Conference, and always has been. It's a small group, so it's an accessible group. It's you know, we all do get to know each other over the years that are in that group, and we've all worked for different companies. We are, you know, technically we're competitors, but when you put us in that group, we're not competitors. We're all learning from each other. We're all talking to each other and learning about, oh, you've been fighting that all year too. It's not just me sitting in my office, you know, beating my head against my desk for this particular problem. You get to share a lot of those things. And the networking aspects of that happen, you know, both in class and with the events they post after class are invaluable.
Chris, I'm going to hop over to you. We mentioned Dante a lot, and we mentioned some other areas outside of just regular nuts and bolts programming. But I think one of the things that I got, and I unfortunately wasn't in those first few training days, but when I arrived there, everybody was really buzzing about this mystery project that was worked on. And as Jared mentioned, and as Dave mentioned, it was kind of neat to be able to work as a team. How did that all come about? And give us a little bit of insight there, because it really sounded like it was something that was a real world task that everybody was able to sink their teeth into.
Sure. So back at Consumer Electronics Show in January, we were there as part of the larger Harman contingent, and one of our partners from India had come to us with a challenge that they had to deliver on a project with some really unique requirements. As they explained it to me, I could tell that this was going to be really complicated to solve, but I knew that we could solve it with some of the things I had seen done with the SVSI product here in our building here in Richardson, Texas. And so I needed to kind of break down their problem. So just a high-level description: they have a convention center, they have several hundred encoders and decoders for networked AV appliances that have to essentially be portable. They can show up in any one room at any one time, and the touch panel in that room has to show them as an available source. But when they go, or source or destination, and when they get disconnected, they have to drop off the touch panel, and then they could be moved to another room to be available there. They had some divisible kind of considerations as well for these spaces. But it got me to thinking that this would be probably an educational experience for most of the attendees here who are dealing with large projects, dealing with divide combine kind of spaces, and dealing with customers that are asking for some kind of leading edge features like that. Most of the time when we deal with projects, it's defined. I have 2 displays, I have 6 inputs, and that is my room. They will all be fixed on the touch panel. But I thought the element of dynamicness kind of added here to where it really was compelling for me. I had my team solve it internally, and then once we solved it and the team debriefed me on and what they did to get and meet this customer requirement, it really became apparent to me that this was some information we wanted to share with this audience. I thought they were at a level where they could consume it quickly, understand what was going on, and you know, privately, I was hoping that maybe there was a different way to solve it. And so I didn't want us to think that there was only one way to solve this, from end to end. And so I wanted to also see if there was maybe a potentially better solution out there, or at least see what people would do to try and solve it. Because the hardest part is understanding what switch port I connected into, and then I have to announce to the world. The guys got creative with some UDP broadcasting to say, I'm here, and that way a master could parse that data and grab that information, and then know that if I care about it based on the port that you were connected to. And so what I wanted to do is find a way to gamify it. We split people into random groups of 3. We made sure that people from the same company weren't partnered up together if they had worked together in the past. I thought there would be some benefits from group collaboration here, where I think oftentimes in our coding worlds, we program in a vacuum. And so there's me from start to finish on a job, and I rarely get code inserted from other players, even if I have other coders in an organization. So it was a neat experiment to see how folks that do work in team environments could share some of their best practices and workflows with others who might not have that in their daily exposure. And so all of that combined for a great problem, potentially neat game, and something that people would actually get a lot of out of that experience through selfishly product exposure to say these features that we put into this SVSI product line uniquely position it in the market to solve these kinds of challenges that, because other players in the market are so new and they've only been around for a year, our experience really shows in these kinds of features. And so when you start to unpack it, you go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Dave, I know you were part of this, and if I recall, probably may have been on the winning team. What were some of the key elements in being successful in tackling this type of a challenge? And what did you feel was the most interesting part of it?
I mean, it was definitely a challenge, and initially, actually, the biggest challenge was that the team I had, we had 3 members, including myself, and none of us were extremely proficient in the SVSI product line. And so, I mean, we were joking around at lunch before we started even, well, what if we were to just go be productive for, our companies, make, and clear some client work? Would it just be easier? Because this was a challenge that we would have to think through in that. But we said, no, we're going to give it a shot. We're going to figure this out. And so what we did was, we started to divide up. We started to look at the whole problem and look at areas where we knew we were going to have to solve certain challenges within the big project. So one of us started just writing the structure of the code so that it was, when we had the answer to those challenging pieces, the base code and the base touch panel layout was ready to go. We could start to fill in the details. So a little more than pseudocode, but basically, start the program in pseudocode. At the same time, then, the other 2 of us started going through each of the challenging pieces and figuring out and brainstorming ways that we might solve it. One of us would go off with our laptop and do some proof of concept and try this. One of us would go there. We'd open up Wireshark and start sniffing the network to see how the boxes are communicating and what they're doing. And we were able to work through each of the different challenging pieces of it. And, full disclosure, there were a couple areas where, we weren't able to figure out the answer right away. So Chris and his team had mechanisms built into the game portion of it of how we could ask for help, and there was a time penalty associated with it. So in our game challenging mode, we had to determine, was it quicker for us to ask for help and take a penalty, or to sit and hit our heads against the wall and try to figure it out? And so there were times we tried to figure it out, and there were times we figured, a 15-minute penalty on the overall score was better than an hour of time hitting our heads against the wall. And so, there was total collaboration there. Another interesting or fun aspect of it that I really commend Chris for was one of the benefits we could get. So, so I talk about the penalties of time, but we were also encouraged, if we found an answer or the solution to a challenging piece, if we were willing to share that with the other teams, with our competitors, we were willing to open source it, we would actually get an advantage on our score. And so we actually took advantage of that a couple times, where we happened to be the first one to get through a challenging piece. And so we decided, let's open it up. Let's share that with the other groups and, remove the barrier for them, also get a score advantage for ourselves. But it was it was done in a way that really mimics what we do in the real world, where if you look at the forum boards and that, a lot of what we do there is open sourcing our solutions to challenges that we run across. And Jared and I were talking about the relationships we build at events like this. That's where it becomes really powerful, because if I'm hitting my head against the wall and I finally get over a battle, and I know that there's others fighting that same battle, sure, I could keep that to myself, but at the same time, it's so much more valuable to us all as a community if I can have that mindset of, let me share this, let me help overcome that hurdle for everyone, and to collectively we elevate our game. So, I commend you, Chris, and your team for really putting together a very practical game as it was.
Jared, I'll jump over to you. Dave talks a lot about the real world training and real world value from this event. What are some of the other things that you are able to use kind of regularly or quickly based on the experience that you had, not only at this but other types of events, and what recommendations would you have for next year's event?
Well, for this one and for Chris's team in general, they do a very good job, especially with this group, but even in the recertification process, of pointing out things in their products. I don't know how they come about knowing that they may not get used. To me, it's always been things I didn't know about in the products. With the example that Dave was just talking about, the feature of an SBSI box to be able to tell you what network switch it was plugged into. That's not information that gets to me in a way that I would pay any attention to it through very many other channels. Chris's team is very good about pointing out those useful functionalities and specifications of their gear that you may not know about. The recertification test a couple of years ago used the near field communications that was built into a touch panel. I'm sure it had been there forever. I'm sure that there's documentation and there was marketing that went along with that. I personally didn't realize it was there or the best ways to use it. And Chris's team has always been very good about, pointing those out and saying, here's how you can use this cool little feature, without just hitting you over the head with here's all the new features of all the new stuff of all the, great stuff that we can do. So the developers conference in specifically, there's always a few of those little nuggets that you pull away that, they're very good at placing those in there. I would say better than the other manufacturers are. The other thing with this one compared to other trainings, not being product specific, and especially now that it is the huge Harman umbrella of things, you're not just focusing on here's how to learn this one thing. It's a week of improving your overall skills on a lot of different platforms. And then add in the networking and all the other people in the room. There's a lot of very, smarter than me people in the room, which is always a good, it's good to be around a lot of people who are smarter than me because I can learn a few of their tricks and tips, especially with the, the games and the things that he sets up like that.
Dave, you and I have talked about this a bit. We've talked about it on the show. AVNation's also done a webinar on the future of control and programming. What are the things that you think that we really need to be investing in to learn? Because, it sounds like we talk a lot, even on this particular show and this event about learning so much more than what we do on a daily basis. What are some areas of focus that you would recommend for programmers, either that are looking to evolve their skills or those that are first getting into the industry to be able to continue to prosper in doing what we're doing?
Well, and unfortunately, the answer is it depends. Where you're headed or what challenges you're up against. But I think in general, what we're seeing from Harman and other manufacturers is a trend towards enabling their products and the tools that are used to program and to bring their product as part of a solution. There's this trend towards using more commercially, commercial or traditional programming languages, I would say. Whether it's JavaScript, whether it's Python, whether it's C#, whether it's, any, the list goes on. HTML5, CSS, JavaScript for user interfaces are on the horizon of what we're going to start to be exposed with. And, if you look at, just the history of progressions of technology, when I started in the industry, I hate to date myself here, but touch screens were, monochrome. Then we got 256 color touch screens. And so our touch panel layouts were square buttons that started out black and white or yellow and black. And then we moved on to having a whole 256 colors where we could use to customize that. And then over time, okay, now we have really, millions of colors available to us. And through that progression, you could continue to build your touch panel layouts with those square single color blocks that were buttons and put text on them. But a number of people in the industry realized that, okay, with this new ability to have more colors and more tools available to me, I can make better aesthetically looking touchscreens. I can start to introduce icons. I can put fancy backgrounds, all those things. Well, that was a progression of the technology, and many programmers kept up with it and were excited by that and jumped on it. And there were some that kept doing it the way they were for a long time. I look at that being sort of where we're at right now, that as we're sort of on this, this beginning of starting to have other tools available to us, I think, I look at as being a programmer, I want to be and keep my skill set and hone my skills to be able to use the right tool at the right time. And the way we've always done it might not be the way that we do it 5 years, 10 years from now. And so, watching those trends of watching, what is a manufacturer talking about in an event like this? What are Chris's engineers working on next? And looking to, okay, in my head, in order to do some of that, I'm going to start to need to really, I'm going to want, I shouldn't say need to, but it's going to be to my benefit, to my company's benefit, if we start to embrace and build up a skill set of HTML5, JavaScript, of others. And as soon as I start to recognize that, okay, now I can start looking for what's the best way to do that. And, and for myself and my team. And it's not going to happen overnight. And that's the biggest thing is, I think for everyone to realize is start slow. Don't think you're going to jump in and learn it all, but start slow and start to pick out new areas that you're going to continually try to enhance your skill set, to enhance your toolbox, so that you and your company, it's not just stay relevant, but can excel at what you do and can continue to drive new revenue to your companies because of that ability.
Jared, I'm going to take this one to you. A lot of times we are really have to hit the ball that's in front of us, right? We have to be able to program and provide the solution that the client asks for. With that said, and knowing that what Dave is talking about, how we have to keep our eye on the trends and what's new and what we need to be thinking about for the future, how do we find that mix and how do we get that experience that Dave mentioned, and as far as mainstream programming languages and new technologies?
Well, I agree with him that it's about having tools in the toolbox, and some of those tools will make our jobs easier and more efficient as we go forward. So sometimes as these other languages and other ways of doing things come about, there has to be a use case for it. And there has to be, a platform there. The manufacturers, the platform has to be there. It has to be reliable. And then there has to be a use case. There has to be a reason for me to want to deviate from what I do all day, every day, whether that's just pure speed or repeatability or some other factor in this one job that comes along. This super complicated job comes along that it would be to my benefit to spend the time to learn or to, really practice with something that I've learned in, a JavaScript or a Python, or to be able to, use that. And you have to have, from my seat, you have to have a job big enough to give you enough time to develop those things and a use case and a reason to go there. At the same time, I think we're all continually developing those things. We know that is the future. I agree with Dave that it's going to be a while before the languages as we know them now just disappear. But the evolution will happen, and it will happen over time. And you do want to be on the forefront of, you want to have that tool ready when the manufacturers start to roll those things out.
Well, one of the other things I've seen and the way I've approached it, to some extent is, you make the exact point that we need the platform to be there first. And once we get to that point, there are also a lot of resources out there who know these other, or have these other tools refined. They might not know AV. They might not know how to program an AV system or even what an AV system is, but there are individuals out there who know these other languages. And so as the platform becomes ready, it also potentially helps with that age-old question of how do I find another programmer? That maybe it becomes, you start by bringing someone with that skill set into your organization, They become the specialist on being able to enable your company to use this new capability, help train the old. At the same time, the old guys, the rest of us, help train that new person on what AV is and how what they're actually applying to. And potentially there's that ability to mesh together from two directions and really elevate the company as a whole. Again, time will tell, how practical that approach is, but it's one that, I know at least, in my organization has been given, a fair bit of mind share, at least as to whether that could be a strategy that would work.
I have to, agree with that idea. And at the moment, the programmers in the industry are acting as so much more than just bits and bytes guys. The actual coding and language of stuff that we do is probably not the majority of what our job actually entails. As it goes forward, it may be that we can, we may subcontract some of that out when it gets into the, the languages where there are, people and companies out there that do nothing but write modules. I just need a module that does this. I need it in this language. There are places you can get that now very cheap, very easy, and very quickly. So the people who are now the programmers the job description may change some.
Yeah, well, and I think it also becomes, in a way, it's our industry maturing into, I'll call it real software development practices. The way software development is approached across, other industries. There's some benefit that may be had. And again, I don't want to say that we're all going to change. It's doom and gloom for us if we want to keep working the way we are. But I guess it's things to consider as we look at what's best for our organization as we're planning into the future.
I think a lot of that will be left up to the manufacturers too, how much training that they have. The benchmark and the gold standard up until now has kind of been, what can I take a tech in the field who knows AV, what can I teach him in a week? If I can teach him to put a system together to make our processor work in an AV system in a week, if I can give him enough knowledge that he will retain in a week to do that, that's kind of been the gold standard. With NetLinks was, a C language. We can't take the whole C language and do that. But if we can teach them enough in a week to get started, and then another week later to get them to the advanced point, they were still able to take AV guys and make programmers out of them. And I hope that they continue that philosophy of keeping the sandbox, to where they can teach somebody the programming they need to stand up a system in a week's worth of classes or something like that, while bringing in all those powerful tools and all of those things that those languages do, give us on top of that. So,
well, Jared, to your point, the nice thing about having standardized languages is, as much as you're right, the responsibility is on us to teach that and make you self-sufficient with our hardware. The great thing is that there are other broader communities out there that have the ability to take someone through a JavaScript or through a C#, right, or through Python. And so the resources that are available to people in our industry right now are just tremendous, that didn't exist when we were dealing with proprietary purpose-built code and hardware. So I'm really excited to see that trend, and it's following in line with what we saw in IT, where they had brands that only worked with their brands, and then as soon as that end user said, I need to be able to interoperate here, that's when that industry matured. And I think we're at that inflection point for our industry right now, where they wanted to be able to make a Dell switch work with an HP and work with an Apple computer, right? And so we're seeing that trend on the hardware side, to where people are looking for more software-defined solutions. It's a real hot topic right now, and so I just see that whole trend happening for us. And to your point, having the ability to get training on these, I, as the head of training for Harman Pro, am excited that there are other people that can help me in this mission to get people qualified and skilled to deliver our goods and services to create great experiences for customers.
So, Chris, I want to end with you, and thank you for that. And this is great dialogue, and I wish that I had a little bit more time to delve into it, and possibly will in a future show. We talked a lot. And each person mentioned how they wanted to learn where Harman was at, and also and what was great about this was applying the ideas and the concepts to the Harman product. I'm sure that that there's others curious about an update on Harman. Can you just give us that before we wrap up for today?
Sure. I think this was an awesome experience for the attendees to really see what's happening at this center here, which is the head of research and development for Harman Pro. Many of them know this building as the former headquarters of AMX. We went through our restructure a few months back, and in a lot of industry publications highlighted the fact that more than 600 of my team members were let go in a big layoff. But what I think those publications didn't really focus on was what the next step beyond that was. And that was the hiring of another 300 plus people. Most of those people actually are coming here into my building in Richardson, Texas. In fact, today there are more people working in this building than there were when we were just AMX. We've reclaimed multiple areas that used to just be warehouse and storage, and turned those into new labs and sound recording spaces. And it was amazing to be able to walk this group through our facility that was led by Rick Gelling, the head of the Center of Competency for Control and Video. And he showed all of the new lab spaces that were here, specifically focused on that next generation product for Harman. Then the team went to downstairs. If anybody ever been in this building, you saw where tech support used to be. They've now relocated into a much larger venue because all of Harman Pro tech support is now done in this building. And so different employees from different brands had moved into this space, and some were new hires. But now that team is all one under this roof, and it's really impressive to walk into that area and see such a large area of tech support people ready to take the call. And then to see things that are kind of behind the scenes action of different digital signage of who's in different call queues and how long people have been waiting, and the mechanisms that are in place to be able to quickly react to someone once they reach a threshold because they want to hear a person on the phone within X number of minutes. And so that was really exciting. And I think a lot of people came asking, what's the future of this brand? What's the future of Harman Pro? And I really think many of them left with this idea of how exciting it is right now for this particular building here in Richardson, and the team that was once AMX has now grown to be many more players and brands than just that, and to see the level of, emphasis that's being placed on this center as well as several others by Harman Pro to not shrink the teams, but to grow the teams into new areas with new capabilities.
Well, thanks for that. And for those who want to get in touch with you, learn either about training or the next year's developers conference, how can they get in touch with you and learn more about Harman Pro?
Sure, no problem. You can always reach me on LinkedIn, or if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at AV Control Guy. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks. Dave Hatz, thanks for being with us. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about AVI systems?
No, thanks for having me. Just a great discussion here today. I am out on LinkedIn, Dave Hatz, at Dave Hatz AVI on Twitter. Take a peruse over to avisystems.com. Find out more. It's more about the company than me. So.
And Jared Spencer from Damiano Global, how can people get in touch with you and learn more about the company that you work for?
DamianoGlobal.com, of course, and Jay Spencer at Damiano Global will get me directly to my email.
Well, I think I'm not alone in congratulating Chris for a successful conference. I think it was a great event, and I think we gained a lot from it, and we're all looking forward to next year's event. For me, my name is Steve Greenblatt. I've been your host. You can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on most social media platforms. You can reach me my company's website, controlconcepts.net. I'm also active within the AVNation family, so you can reach me there as well. Please visit the website, avnation.tv, to learn more about this program and other programs, both weeklies and monthlies, and also visit the underwriters who help to support AVNation. So that'll be it for today for this episode of A State of Control.